Happy Friday. This is Coach Becky from Doc Wayne, and I'm here with U.S. Track and Field Olympian Erica McLain. In addition to the 14 NCAA All-American titles and 3 U.S. National Championship titles, Erica has forged her post-athletic career in the field of software product management at the top Silicon Valley companies, including Facebook and Google. And I just want to remind everyone that we're on episode 11 of Kids and COVID-19. And thank you all so much for joining us. And again, just to reiterate, if you're on Facebook Live with us today, just give us a thumbs up or a wave. And if you have any questions for us today, just put them down in the chat function and we'll try to get to them. If we miss your question, you can always reach out to us at support@docwayne.org. Hi, Erica. How are you today?
Hey, Coach Becky. I'm doing as well as can be under the circumstances, I think. I'm trying. I'm super happy to be chatting with you today. So yeah, everything's fine in this moment.
Yeah, thank you so much. How have things been going with the changes in life with COVID and just the disruption in the daily activities?
Yeah, the changes have been a lot. I think when this first started, at least, for work, we were told to start working from home. Really with Google, I've been at home since, I believe, March 8th, that first week of March, really, or second week. We all kind of thought this was going to be a 3-week thing, a 4-week thing, and then, it's all just sort of continuing. So it's just a matter of like finding a at-home routine. That's been hard. I think that the beginning parts were like, oh, this is temporary, so cool. I'll try some things from home that I haven't done before. I've done a lot of DIY projects, a lot of painting and a lot of different creative projects and things that I've wanted to try. I've tried soap making even, and then as it's continued, I'm like, wait, this is really a new normal. It definitely went through some ways of just depression where it was hard to get out of bed, and I was just like, what? Like seeing all the news reports, and I had to kind of like, I wanted to be informed, but I had to take a moment to just take myself offline for a little bit, group, and then re-energize. So I feel like I'm just going through waves and ebbs and flows of trying to find new personal routines and, with my regular cadence of how I would typically commute to work, providing, opportunity for me to do more personal time and personal reflection. I don't have that carved out anymore. So I've had to like work on diligently carving out a new sort of at-home schedule for me that's been challenging, but I think setting challenges and setting your own sort of like boundaries is always part of life. So this is just a new opportunity to do that. I will also say, though, I know we're on live on video. I'm on video chats all day for work, and that can get really exhausting. I find like my eyes are pretty tired. I definitely had to rely on my computer glasses a lot. It's something about just like staring through a screen that I find really taxing and hard, but I know we're all going through it. So it's something like, okay, we're all in this together.
Yeah. Do you have the classic Zoom exhaustion that people talk about?
I do. It's so real. I had no idea. And then I hear about my little niece and nephew who I realize are the same age as your kids, 3 and 5, and like the exhaustion they feel and the confusion they feel. I'm like, I'm an adult. I feel that too. You're not alone. Like Auntie Soupy feels that too. That's what they call me.
Yeah, it's so real. That's a super cute nickname too. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's a common experience of so many people, and also just so helpful to so many people just to have that shared by you, just to uplift their experience that this is real for people and this is what we're all going through. But
it's real, and I say, like, I work in tech. This is my day-to-day. I'm always at a computer, so I can't imagine even people who like this is very new for them, and it's scary, and how do you get this set up, and like, what do I do, where do I look? So all of that is very real. Even for someone like me who works in tech and that's like my day-to-day, it's a real challenge. And so I've also spent a lot of time during this time helping other people and trying to reach out. Different organizations are trying to get their setups online because they're typically involved in more in-person interactions. So trying to like help coach them and be like, it's okay, we got this, and here's some tips and tricks. So that's something else that I've been doing during this time.
Yeah, and you came to us via Athletes for Hope, so we want to give them a big shout out for that. And you do a lot of volunteer work and just connecting to other organizations, which we're really thankful for. But as we talk about COVID and all of these different projects you're involved in, can you share a little bit about your athletic, personal, and professional journey? And specifically, I'd love to hear why you've chosen Go to Your Destiny as a centralizing theme or mantra for your life.
Yeah. So I will say my athletic journey, I think really started as a 2-year-old, probably, the 1988 Olympics, just watching the gymnasts on TV and flipping myself around and trying to do everything they did. And from that moment, I think my career and passion in sports just sort of took off. My mom was like, okay, we got to get this girl into gymnastics because she's not going to stop trying to throw herself around. I just don't want her to kill herself. And from then it just became something that, I was always a very active kid. And I was always a very focused kid. And I think what I've been able to do and what athletics has taught me is sort of that diligence and trying harder over and over again, and like learning from failure. And it's just given me a lot of opportunity to figure out, how am I operating through different challenges in life? How am I thinking about, myself and my, sort of like role in kind of the whatever space it was that I was occupying. And my grandmother was the one who coined the "you go to your destiny, girl," is what she would always tell me. Before every competition, I never wanted to talk to my parents. I was always like way too nervous. I just wanted to be shut out. The only person I would talk to is grandma. She just had this way of encouraging me to always be myself. She was one of the first people and adults in my life that I remember like championing my like eccentricities, if you will. And you don't go to your destiny was something she would always tell me before every competition. I couldn't set foot out without hearing those words from her. And it's really become something personal to me, not only because it was from my grandmother, but just because I feel like it's something that everyone has a destiny, however you want to define that. Everyone has opportunities to be better or bigger than, however they're defined by society. You can define kind of like your own path and what is it that is personally relevant to you. And so that's sort of how I looked at destiny. I looked at like, what is it that I want to be? How is it that I want to define that? How is it that I want to get there? And then trying to share my own personal goals with other people, I think is what has really helped me also kind of like open up. And it's also a vulnerable space. It's vulnerable to think, because the word destiny is so big and kind of undefined. It also sounds in a lot of ways unachievable or even like sci-fi. But I think it's that space that you can create it yourself. You can kind of define what that space is, and then share that message with others. Share what is your destiny, and I think it's just become really personally relevant to me as a space of sort of defining my own opportunities and not letting others, which others have tried, and I've allowed them to define who I am, and that's something that I've had to like break down, and then reflect back to myself, like, no, who am I? Like, not how am I defined by others? And then like try to live that out.
Yeah, I think that's especially empowering for Doc Wayne's young people, but also really any young person in the world today, given the climate and what's happening around us, because people do try to define you. And I love how broad destiny is, but you can also lean on people too. So we talk about at Doc Wayne to build your team, but also you can look within, as you're saying, and say, what do I want to be? And how can I fulfill my destiny? So I love that. It's so beautiful that it can work in all those different facets. But as you know, here at Doc Wayne, we seek to fuse sport and therapy to heal and strengthen at-risk youth. How has mental health played a role in your sport experience? and or the larger game of life for you, your teammates, or I know you've already spoken about some of your loved ones in your life.
Yeah, I think mental health has played just such a huge role. I can say there was one very salient moment. I wasn't even thinking about this in a mental health capacity. But and actually there's probably like two key stories. I'll start with the one that's a bit more maybe like surface level, but still very much important. And I'll go into the one that I think I've never really expressed before, but like I've thought a lot about. The first moment was it was 2009. I think I was definitely ranked in the top 20 in the world. I was jumping incredibly well, like in practice and at other meets. And it was at the 2009 World Championships in Berlin. I went out to compete and I didn't even make the finals. I had one of the worst performance days I've ever had. I had been jumping and competing at the level that I should have been on the podium that day, winning a gold, silver, or bronze medal. And I would have been the first American triple jumper, female triple jumper to do that. No one has been, well, at least to that at that date, had ever been on the podium at a major world championship or Olympic event. But I didn't make finals that day. I went back, I was crying on the bus all the way back to the hotel, trying to figure out what went wrong. And something just like a light bulb went off, and I realized, wait, I'm stronger than I've ever been. I'm faster than I've ever been. My technique is I don't want to say flawless because we'll never get to that point, but it was better than it had ever been. What was wrong? And what I realized, I hadn't trained my mind. That was the missing piece. And the more and more I learned about sports psychology from that moment was I realized, anyone who's at the top of their game, even top of the game could be like, okay, you're the best in your second grade class. The math skills better than anyone else. But guess what? When you have that, time pressured test that you have to take, it's who has the mental tenacity and focus and strength to overcome that next barrier. So I was just as strong and fit as all of my other competitors, but they had their minds trained just as well as their bodies, and that's something that I didn't have. So I actually began working with a sports psychologist who had been the sports psychologist for some of my prior teams. So he was someone that I felt like I could trust. But he lived in Denver. I lived in California. But I didn't that could have been a barrier, right? It was like, because it's so personal to find a psychologist and someone in general that you want to talk to. And it's hard when that person can't be there with you in person. And I know that's something we're all going through now, is like, we're not able to be a lot of times with our loved ones, let alone, the doctors who had been helping us. And so, but he was in Denver. So what we set up was we did weekly phone calls. He would email me different like homeworks and worksheets that I would do. And it was every single Wednesday. And I started to see, a lot of like just like mental training and visualization, and was able to use that to over the next year, while I thought I was, at my peak in 2009, just catapult to a whole new level of mental success and my ability to train more diligently, to compete with more focus and rigor. And it was just an outstanding, amazing change that I felt like physically and mentally, and something that I'd never really experienced before. And I will say, the next year after that, I actually, for the start of the 2011 season, decided to forego my indoor season, because I was like, no, like, we're going to be coach. Like, we just wanted to blow everyone out of the water in 2011. And my goal was to be at worst top 5 in the world, and definitely get on the podium at the 2011 World Championships. While at my career, ultimately, with the start of the demise of my career, was I jumped too far and had basically a medical anomaly of an injury, where my ankle flipped 180 degrees upside down. And it was this open dislocation that ultimately happened because I jumped too far at practice. I was so well mentally trained and prepped and prepared that I went far above and beyond myself, but I would not have been able to do that without the rigorous sports psychology and the mental training that I had been doing. Nothing else really changed with my workouts. That was a full, purely mental, endeavor. But I will also say that, and this is the part that is a lot more personal, at least to me, and in some ways probably a bit private, but it's something I feel like, given the times that we're in and the challenges of especially kids not being, and I think one of the things I've reflected on around COVID is, okay, a lot of us are all stuck at home. That's fine for us that have safe home environments, but think about it, there's a lot of kids out there that don't. So their mental outlet was, being able to go to school, being able to spend time with their therapists and their mentors. Maybe their parents or those, in their home life didn't create a safe space. And it's not to say I had, for the most part, a safe space at home. But I would say, like, my parents, they were going through their own challenges, and the way that personally and mentally affected me was hard. I think the first time that I actually kind of thought about, even like ending my life and just having these like really deep, dark thoughts, I was 10. The more I reflect back on that, and I've been reflecting on that a lot as an adult, is like, wow, how did a 10-year-old get to that point where life was so dark? Like, sports were my way out of that. Like, I was able to go to gymnastics, and I spent, over 24 hours a week literally in the gym training with my coaches. And so that was my outlet. I was able to be away from home. I was able to focus on sport. And I just think also that gave me that mental outlet to sort of escape the mental challenges I was facing at home. It gave me mental and objectives to focus on. And so I had that safe space. So I think as we're thinking about how kids in various home environments, whether it's safe or not, but just thinking about that outlet that sports gave them, and that they're not able to do to the same level today, I think that is something. I don't have a solution for this. I'm just simply saying that that's something I have experienced, and I know that's something that you all are working on and working towards, and that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about your organization and excited to continue learning more and being involved. It's just thinking through, and that's, losing my headset, but that's something I see also would love to ask you about during this call, is just like, when kids don't have the ability to get to their sport, how can we help them in virtual ways to experience sport and the power of sport and the power of just like mental strength, while they're at home and while they simply only have access to sort of like virtual communication.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Erica. And I just want to say that you're a champion for talking about this, and you don't have to have all the solutions to speak up for kids and to use your voice for change. So you're doing that just today by coming on with us and being on Facebook Live and speaking up for our kids. So I say that with great appreciation, and it takes a lot of bravery for you to speak out, and you're making change by just doing that. So thank you very much. And you've also talked in the past about your own dyslexia and advocated for personalized learning approaches. And at Doc Wayne, most of our services are provided during the school day, although we do provide them before and after school and community settings, as well as some residential treatment facilities. You've shared so much already. What would you say to our kids who are listening and are struggling with dyslexia and similar struggles to what you just expressed before about suicidal ideation, but also dyslexia?
Yeah, I think I will say also, I didn't know that I was dyslexic until it was a counselor my freshman year of college at Stanford who actually worked with me and kind of diagnosed it, and then like had me go through all the testing, and then worked on plans to help me get through my schooling. And it's interesting. I do want to say, but how that showed up though when I was younger, and my parents, we didn't realize really what I had. It was just like athletics taught me diligence and focus, and regularly learning how, like, personalized techniques to overcome challenges, you know, in my field of sport. And I just simply was able, not simply, because it certainly wasn't simple, but had to work to apply those same principles to my academic studies. So I will say that, you know, how dyslexia showed up for me as a kid was, it just took me a lot longer to understand and process the concepts that we were learning. It was incredibly hard for me to read. The words would bounce all over the page. I'd pick up words from other parts of the page. And like, so that made comprehension of paragraphs incredibly hard. And it was even hard to listen and take in and organize the words people were saying to me, you know, verbally. So I just got in the habit of like taking rigorous notes, carving out time for myself to, you know, if it took the average person, say 30 minutes to read a paragraph or, you know, work on some homework segment, it was probably going to take me at least 2 hours. Yeah. And so I had to carve out that time. And I will say, you know, I mean, I was a pretty, I'm definitely an introvert. I feel like I've learned to be a high functioning introvert. But I definitely, a lot of that was probably because I had to cut out a lot of social time as a kid, not only because I was dedicating so much time to sport, but because I needed that extra time to study. And so I think one tip is just allow yourself space and be okay with that. It was hard for me to do my homework next to other friends, so I preferred to do it alone because I would feel bad when they're like, oh, how come you're not done yet? Like, why are you still working on that problem? And it just kind of beat on me, like, why am I not as fast as doing my homework as other people? But that's okay, I think. And that's where I love like the whole personalized learning outlets and opportunities, because it allows people and students and of all ages to learn at your own pace and learn in your own way. So I learned that I invested, that's might be the wrong overstating word, but like Nancy Drew books were I could power through a Nancy Drew book. And it was because like I loved reading that content. And I guess, sure, I didn't need to absorb every single word to get the context, but it gave me confidence in reading. So I would say, like, find subjects and find topics that you're really interested in. And I think that's one of the things that I found really interesting about sport. A lot of people look at sports outlet as sort of a frivolous just way to pass time or a way to burn energy. But really, if you think about the academic tenets and principle of the entire sports industry, from being a player, where you really need to know a lot about, you know, proprioception and like human biology and the anatomy of the body and the way the body moves, you know, and even, you know, the mental capacity of an athlete. There's a lot of academic concepts in there. There's a lot, you know, if you think about sports journalism, so being able to read, write, and communicate and express about sports, there's the whole you know, analytics, so being a sports analysis and being able to be a commentator and take an academic, like, numbers approach to the game. And, you know, we've even seen how teams have used numeric approaches to even improving their strategies in the field of play. So there are so many academic principles within sports. And so I think if a kid is very naturally interested in sports, not only just in the field of play, but by really becoming a student of the game and of the industry, maybe that's a way for someone who has an interest in sports but happens to be dyslexic can really get involved and like find a subject matter that is compelling to you. Find a subject matter that I think when you're personally engaged and personally invested, even if it's a non-traditional path, that is one way. That is, at least for me, how I was able to overcome a lot of my learning challenges. I also learned that for me, having things digital. So even through business school, I had to take, I used an iPad for everything, for digital note taking, and it helped me stay organized. That was another part of being able to working towards overcoming my dyslexia. It was forming an organization strategy. And I will say that was also really hard, though, because our business school had a no technology policy. So you weren't supposed to have any tech, computers, iPads, phones out in class. But here I was with my iPad. So it was just another way again that I felt really singled out. And I had some classmates that would like kind of like ask me about it, but in sort of a negative way, not like seeking for understanding. So I felt again judged, but I didn't also feel confident enough to tell them like, oh, it's because I'm dyslexic. I felt sort of ashamed by that, and so I kept it hidden. But by trying to keep it hidden, it grew a greater divide, I think, between me and my classmates. So I think so for other, so I think for say if someone's listening, a child's listening, an adult's listening, that you don't have dyslexia, but or any mental challenges, I think when you're just communicating with others, like seek for understanding. And if you are someone that has those challenges, as much as you can, try to be brave and say, well, hey, this is what I'm going through, and try to have an open conversation about it. If you can, and just say like, if you're, for those dyslexia or a lot of with like mental challenges, it doesn't mean you're not smart. It just means you process things in a different way. And I think a lot of things with my dyslexia also have made me a very creative person. I'm a very creative, sort of out of the box thinker, and that's shown up. That's, I think, what's helped me be successful as a product manager, because I'm constantly having to come up with creative product solutions in the tech space that work for a very global population, a population that are people who don't look like me. And I think so the way my challenges with dyslexia have caused me to become a creative thinker, I think has actually been an asset. So anyways, I would say try on both sides, seek for understanding, tell people what you have going on with you, and that might help just create some common understanding.
Right. Those are really good points. And kind of to summarize a lot of the obstacles and barriers that you've been through. You were in a really dark place as a 10-year-old, and then you were going through some dyslexia. But I think it's a real message of hope to our kids and to their parents, as well as anyone that's advocating for them in their life, that through personalized approaches and innovative services, that you became an Olympian and someone who is really successful in the business world and has a really fulfilling life. So we just need to continue to build on these innovative and engaging services so that we can continue to support young people. But I think you asked a really great question about virtual services, as well as how do we reach people at such a young age, and how is it possible that a 10-year-old can get to be in a place that they're considering such things that you were. But I think one thing we can look to is the power of sport to combine with the approaches that we know work with research. So things like dialectical behavior therapy and caring adult figures like coaches, so that we can combine forces essentially. And that's what we're doing here at Doc Wayne. Not to say that we have all the answers, but it's one such approach. And there are many other great, wonderful organizations that do amazing work. But I think it's something that we want to collaborate with others on here in the United States, but also globally, to try to find more solutions. And you work in the tech world, so it doesn't even mean just like collaboration in the mental health world, but we want to work with everyone to be able to find more solutions so that 10-year-olds are not in such a dark place in their life, because it really shouldn't be. But lastly, Erica, I wanted to ask if there's other struggles or barriers or other societal issues that you've used or want to use your voice for as an athlete to make the world a better place. And kind of going off of that, can you share any words of wisdom based on those different societal issues for our parents, coaches, or our global sport community? It's a loaded question.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot. And I mean, I think for me, as I mentioned, like this is the first time I'm even speaking out about any of the mental challenges really that I've faced, or even like the hurdles that I've had to overcome. And so I think for me, it is finding the courage to do more of this, to let other people know, hey, they're not alone, or hey, yeah, I started in that really dark place as a 10-year-old, and it doesn't mean that like things suddenly became rosy and sunny. There was a path and a lot of things that I've had to work through and continue to work through to get there. And so I would love to sort of I want to start opening up. I think the more we keep this conversation quiet and private, and I even found the more I kept it private, the harder it became for me, the more I even opened up to some of my business school classmates. I ran into one on the train before COVID started a couple months ago, and I actually told him, like, yeah, one of the reasons why I feel like I didn't connect with you as much was like I was dealing with dyslexia, and here were some of the mental challenges I was dealing with. And, you know, just even, yeah, so I think one of my advice would be, like, if we could start continuing to open up this conversation and be honest about it. But to speak about a societal issue that I also haven't spoken about, but have been reflecting on a lot, even, you know, before this, you know, resurgence again of Black Lives Matter, is something that seems really simple and that maybe a lot of people don't think about. But for me, it's the topic of hair. And it's interesting to think about how much growing up my hair has caused me mental challenges and anxiety and a lot of ways, like judgment. And that is, like, and especially like the Black community, like having our natural hair it can be a struggle, especially as I'm thinking about competing. That's like a lot of like African Americans and Blacks, we don't like to swim because it's really hard on our hair and what we're going to do with our hair. But I think even more than that, you know, we've been seeing repeated stories in the news around young athletes not being able to compete, or being kicked off their sports teams because of their hair, because of how they were styling it. And in most of those cases, they were simply trying to put their hair in braids or wear their hair in locks in ways that was like either a natural or a protective style that would allow them to play their sport or without having their hair be in the way. And somehow that became something that was prohibited. And I think you've got to imagine the trickle down effect that has on those kids mentally. They're being told there's something wrong with your hair. There's something wrong with you. You're not good enough. You are not accepted. And they're being singled out amongst their teammates and their friends. And that's teaching their teammates and their friends around them that, yeah, there is something wrong with your hair. There is something wrong with how you're presenting yourself. It's not acceptable. And we won't accept you. And I think that it's so real. It's something that I feel like a lot of times people don't really think about, but at least I know for me, you know, I did keep my hair in braids. Luckily I had, you know, my school, I was probably the only one, well, one of the few, like I grew up in more predominantly Caucasian area, and rather affluent area. But no one really made a big deal out of it. But for me, it was, gosh, before every competition, I'd like look up the weather because if it was going to rain, it was like, oh no, what about my hair? And sometimes that was really distracting. Like I wasn't competing at my best because I was worried about my hair looking a mess. And I was worried how it was going to be perceived by others because I don't have like silky hair that was just going to get wet and like it was all be fine. I can throw it into a ponytail. No, I couldn't do that. And that actually caused a lot of mental challenges. I think about it even today going into the workforce when I have job interviews. Google, I think, was the first interview I went to with my hair in a naturally curly state because a lot of times that this wouldn't be seen as acceptable. My hair didn't look, you know, straight. Like most of the time I would flat iron it and wear my hair straight, which is really, it's damaging for my hair. But that was what was seen as acceptable. And that was what was a safer way to secure a job. But it shouldn't have to be like that. I think if you think about the athletic space and just athleticism and competition, it's a celebration of the human body and the celebration of what the human body can do naturally. And I think our hair is just a natural representation also and part of that human body. So to say in the sports world that there are ways that your hair is unacceptable or prohibitive of you being able to compete, that's something that I haven't spoken out about but I've reflected on a lot. I've been wanting to do a lot of writings about it, but that's something that also that I think is a challenge that I hope we're going to find ways to overcome and have those kids and all the kids and adults around them mentally accept something as simple as their hair as being a beautiful part of their athleticism and their unique, talent and gift and beauty. So
yeah. Thank you, Erica. I've appreciated in so many ways this conversation and your authenticity and your openness about all of these different aspects, your hair, your mental health, just who you are as a person. It's really refreshing, and I hope that everyone would be so open, especially in the sports community, but really everyone across the world. It would do so much for everyone. But if you have a few questions for me, I'm very open and would be happy to answer them.
Sure. I think I've asked you a couple already. I know I don't want to drill you with questions, but I think what it would just be helpful for me to understand, what have been some of the predominant challenges, you've touched on them a little bit, but that you've seen both your students and your student athletes experience mentally, but as well as especially for adults and role models or those that are attempting to be role models. What are some of the challenges and barriers that you've seen from those communities that we can, start thinking about how might we address them?
Yeah, sure. So here at Doc Wayne, our top 3 mental health diagnoses are PTSD, ADHD, and adjustment disorder. But in no way is anyone ever defined by their diagnosis. But a common theme amongst those diagnoses and really like our kids in general is trauma. So we live in a really complex world, and our youth are usually struggling with things like community violence, early childhood adversity or trauma. So those things that happen to kids really early on that really transform the brain, the way their brain functions, and then their life outcomes. Mm-hmm. Bullying is another one, and then other forms of interpersonal trauma. So things that happen to them that unfortunately took place between someone that loved them or was taking care of them. And as a specific example, systemic racism and oppression is trauma. So if you're thinking about the kids at Doc Wayne, a fair amount of them are Black and brown boys. So they are heavily impacted and being traumatized by systemic racism. And then you asked about parents or other caregivers. Trauma is intergenerational, and it's passed down through family lines, and it can be passed down genetically. That doesn't mean that there's not hope and like there's ways to intervene and support kids and families, but they're also struggling because they've been dealing with this for generations. So also like the chronic and persistent stress that's going on for parents and also their kids. And you mentioned at the beginning the whole piece about isolation and kids being in their homes, and that's just compounding everything. But also with parents, finances, housing instability, and the resources to be able to be fully present and supportive of their kids is also also compounding the situation and making it more difficult for them to deal with things like systemic racism, but also intergenerational trauma and being able to support their kids fully. So I know that was a long answer, but that's really what
I think all the answers I gave you were long, so I think yours was shorter than mine.
Yeah, it's kind of a complex issue, so that's my shortened answer.
Yeah, I think I think that piece around the it being generational definitely resonates. And if those are the things that the adults experience, like that's their lived experience, and a lot of times they are passing that down. But I do think that at least what I've seen and the services that I've taken advantage of in terms of like working through mental health, I think that's it's helped me to see how I can change and not be in sort of how I've talked about, like not being a victim of your circumstances. And that's sort of my, that you go to your destiny piece is around like breaking from those norms and those experiences that you've had, and how are you working to redefine yourself which is certainly not an easy and overnight thing to do. But I think the follow-up question I would have to that is like, how can we, and you all are already doing amazing work, but how can someone else like myself and other people continue to reach, some of these kids? I don't know what platforms they're using now, or what their role models are like, and who is it that they're looking up to. Please don't tell me that I have to start making TikTok videos, because that I have no idea how to do that, but if it helps, I'll try. Yeah, like I guess I wanted to close and figure out, how might I or other people like me who have messages that they'd love to share with these kids, how can we continue reaching out to them? What are some of the messaging that really resonates with them?
Yeah. Well, first, just thank you for asking that question, because it shows that you care, and it shows that you want to make a difference for our kids and all kids. So I appreciate that. But I first want to say that I think that anyone can make a difference. And you're asking about like, how do you do it and who best can do it? But anybody can make a difference in some way. So if you want to make a difference, please email us at support@docwayne.org, and we will find a way for you to make a difference. But in terms of, who do kids look up to, what's the best way? I would say that be genuine and speak your truth like you did. And, don't sugarcoat things, but we need to teach them to be hopeful and teach them how to contribute and how to change the world. And the last attribute that I think of is love. We don't always talk about love, but when we love our kids fiercely and we show them that we love them, I think it makes a huge difference. And you also asked how practically, but I don't have a specific answer in terms of you need to make 500 TikTok videos. I'm not on TikTok either, but you can make a difference in your own community, and you can take an interest in the kids that are in your life, and you can try to show them that you care. You can also start to educate yourself on trauma-informed care and implicit bias if you're a white person. And you can make steps in your own life that can contribute to the larger community. But again, if you want to make a direct impact on our work and the kids that we serve, I'll speak to that at the end, but absolutely feel free to reach out to us if you're interested in figuring out how you fit into the larger team, essentially, because we're very open.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you so much. As we wrap up our time today, I just want to thank Erica for really her transparency and genuineness, and for sharing her mental health story. And I encourage other people to explore their own mental health journey, and just think about how they can support others through their transparency. But for people who aren't familiar with our work, or maybe jumped on in the middle of the live feed, at Doc Wayne, we fuse sport and therapy to heal and strengthen at-risk youth. And during this pandemic, we're providing telehealth services to kids and to families. Typically, we do this in schools, community centers, and residential treatment facilities. And if you need us at all, please reach out to us at support@docwayne.org. And if you're interested in supporting our work and helping us reach more kids, you can visit us at docwayne.org or text donate to 205-570-7251. And again, as a reminder, this session with Erica is part of a larger series called Kids in COVID-19, and you can watch the previous episodes on our YouTube page, and the handle for that is Doc Wayne DTG. And that's all for us today, but we hope you stay healthy and happy, and have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.